Association football, the greatest sport on earth by far. Just 22 men and one ball. And it's the greatest sport on earth. And we've just had the World Cup, the greatest tournament on earth. We've just had the World Cup final, the most watched sport event on earth. And things have happened. In this piece of paper here, we have the top 10 players of all time, without a doubt.
And it's facts as well.
It's facts.
Yeah, there's multiple people gone into making that
Yes,
list.
a well-esteemed panel has gone into making this list. And we've taken all the votes, and it's interesting readings in this list. Welcome to the Streets Won't Forget podcast. I'm your host, Dodzi Ladzekpo, and I'm here today with...
Louie, yes guys.
And Keelan.
Keelan, special guest on the show. First of many episodes for Keelan, don't you worry.
Yes.
He took part in the voting as well, and he will be having his say in this. Guys, what was... Louie, I'll come to you first.
Yeah.
When doing these votes, right, choosing the greatest players of all time, what was your criteria? What were you like... what were the factors you were taking into account?
Obviously, when me and you were sort of going to the war room, right, we basically said to people, like, you've got free reign of this, you can do what you want. If you want to put someone in your top 10 who's going to be risque, different, cool, do that, man. It's your criteria. For me, I've... whenever I do this normally, I sort of go players I've watched with my own eyes, but I feel like some players... We'll get onto it, obviously, but some players who I haven't watched transcend football and are bigger than football itself and have done things in the game that are still taking place today, and they're the godfathers. So I feel like, for me, it was mainly based on what I've seen, clips I've seen, but also, what my dad's told me, what my granddad's told me, the things I've heard, stuff like that. So
Yeah. I think that's valid, man. I kind of went for similar, to be fair. Like, mainly players I've seen, and like you said, what you've heard, and players that transcend football. But I really tried to stick with players I've seen because, as we'll see later, there's been so many players who've had great spells in the sport, and trying to be objective about it and being like, this player was better than that player when I haven't actually seen both players was difficult.
It's tough.
Keelan, how was your selection process? What did you kind of go for when you were looking, when you make this list?
I think similar to you guys, obviously, having seen the player and sort of like watched the player, that was a huge part of it. And I think sort of with a lot of the older players, I felt with sort of the tournament structures and sort of just the whole nature of football back then, like we can't fully understand it from the sort of statistics we get today and the sort of stories that come about. So it's quite hard to understand like what those sort of how their performance affected those teams back then, like sort of like with the Champions League, how that has changed with sort of the World Cup used to have less teams. There's so many factors. Mainly focused on sort of players I'd seen, and then I think longevity was a huge part of my decision process, just because I think there's lots of players that's had sort of good spells and like remarkable seasons, but it's sort of doing that over and over again, which I think that's what makes the greats the great.
I think with some of these things as well, right, and we'll get onto some of the people we've all got on ours individually very shortly, but for me, right, the way I look at certain players from certain eras, science in general has progressed so much in the last 10, 15 years, let alone in football. So the players have the fine margins now that they didn't have even 10 years ago. You get players, they come in, they'll have personalised plans for training. They'll have one member of staff working with one player specifically to get them prime pristine fitness. They've got chefs, 3 different chefs for three different meals a day. They've got all of this stuff that gives them that enhancement now. I think with some of the stuff from even 10 years ago, you have to take with a pinch of salt to what you have now.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a statement, to be fair. I think football right now is better than it's ever been.
Oh, yeah. No.
I know people look at certain eras where they grew up watching football for the first time and be like...
Nostalgia merchants. Man.
Yeah, nostalgia merchants. That was the best era. Right now, we've got the most research. We've got the best coaches. We've also got so much to look back on that, like, you can use in terms of like going forward in terms of your, coaching and improving players. It's really hard to say that a time like the 50s or 60s where tournaments, let's have it right, Champions Leagues, you're having way less games, league games, way less games. It's hard to put that up against today and being like, that was, you have to compare them the same. Same time, you have to respect, I think, the, heritage of football and the past and, what certain players have done, because, who am I at the same time to really be saying this player was better than that player back then. But I've just gone for, what my top 10 is and what I feel that is based on clips. Because I do think as well, if you haven't necessarily seen the player live, just before your time, let's say, but you've seen clips of them, you've watched documentaries, I think you've got a valid reason to talk about them. I mean,
well, there's one player on my list who I never personally watched live, but every single person I've spoke to who's watched him live says the same thing about him.
Yeah.
And you can probably grasp who that is without me even mentioning their name. Obviously, we will get onto it. But for me, when there's someone like that, and everyone says the exact same thing about him, who's watched him,
you got to take it into account.
You got to take that. You got to take that.
Yeah.
I just think with the sort of modern football now as well, like it's the talent pool of people going into football. It's bigger than it's ever been. It's obviously growing each year, but the sort of reward there is from being football, it's more than just there's sort of playing football, all the viewership that comes with that. It's so much bigger than it was back in the day, and all the sort of money involved in it. That does the sort of competition between players that you can't. You've got to give 110% to make it as a football player now, which I don't think that was as much the case in the past. People weren't as interested in football, whereas now, like, there's so many people trying to get into football. It creates competition, creates the best players.
Bro, that's facts. You literally had certain players from the 70s who, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, were going on the pitch drunk, and scoring 6 goals. You can't do that today. You actually can't.
I mean... Maybe.
Well, you had a player from England in the 90s who, his career got cut very short. Paul Gascoigne, mention him. Yeah, best English talent apparently of all time. But compared to even players like Jordan Henderson, he's had a way better career. So let's get into it. I'll first go with players who actually haven't been voted for at all in this list. I'll run you through a few names. Wayne Rooney, the Man United, biggest club in England, all-time top scorer, England's all-time top scorer, received 0 votes. How do you guys feel about that?
It's fair.
Fair.
It's fair.
Do you think it's fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair. And then sort of a point, I might get onto it later, but I think that United team under Fergie I feel like a lot of players come into that underrated bracket. But I think it is fair in terms of a top 10. But to have no mentions... obviously, as the list goes on, we'll see what guys are above him with more mentions.
We'll see.
I mean, I love Rooney more than most people in the player. I think he's England's best. Probably, I think he is England's most successful player ever. I think he's England's best player ever. But I don't think there's an English player on this list. I mean, Dodzi knows the answers. I don't. But that says it all, really, doesn't it?
I'll tell you that. There was 2 English players that got votes.
Oh, okay, I know one.
2 English players. I don't think you'll get them.
I know one.
You know what? Have a guess right now who the players are.
Kevin Keegan.
Okay, have a guess who the other player is.
One's Beckham.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
What about the other one?
One's Beckham. One's Gascoigne.
Okay. I'll just say it now. The only 2 English players that got votes: David Beckham and John Terry.
John Terry
got a vote.
Crazy.
John Terry got a vote. Yeah,
that is insane.
But
checking the United.
Just quickly, I do want to touch on David Beckham. To be fair, I actually get why he got a vote. This guy in about like 1999, 98. He came 3rd in the Ballon d'Or. He's arguably the best free kick taker of all time. Let's not forget he was England captain as well in the 2000s. Growing up, I always looked to David Beckham as the go-to player for England before he retired, before he dropped the captaincy. I think. Because he's got everything outside of football going on, people don't actually realise this guy was a top player. He was topping the assist charts every season for United.
Sorry to interrupt you there as well. Obviously, we weren't alive to experience it, but he pulled England out of a lot of holes.
Right.
A lot of holes. Obviously, the goal against Greece, if he's not on the pitch, we don't qualify.
100%.
And for a country like England, we've seen it, not qualifying for a tournament. That is... not just a sackable offence, you're a meme for the rest of your life as a footballer and as a coach.
100%.
So he saved a lot of people's careers by taking them to that tournament. And that was a good squad, so-called.
Keelan, David Beckham, what would you say about him?
So I think with David Beckham, the sort of reputation he had, like that name, growing up, that name carried so much. It was such a huge name. Guy's got a film made in sort of tribute to him. And I just think with sort of him towards the end of his career, I think he was one of the sort of early people to sort of go to a club for high wages as a sort of retirement option in sort of going to LA Galaxy. And I think just people kind of thought that was a bit too early for him to go. And I think sort of up until then, players were kind of retiring on a high. They might win the World Cup, they might win the Champions League, then they retire that year, and then they get a proper farewell, and you kind of get their whole career sort of brought back into it gets spoken about completely again, their whole career, and it kind of reminds you of how good that sort of player was. Whereas with Beckham, he kind of just phased into sort of doing other stuff, which as he was a footballer, he was still relevant in all this as being a celebrity, in which the football kind of got distracted away from a bit, I think.
The thing with Beckham, right, the more I think about it, right, we had a little interval there, 5 minutes, but the way I thought about it in that last 5 minutes, actually thinking about just the clubs he's played for. Man United, biggest club in England. Yeah. Real Madrid, biggest club in the world, definitely biggest club in Spain. AC Milan, biggest club in Italy. Yeah. He's played for the 3 biggest clubs in 3 of the biggest footballing countries in the world, and it's not like he was a bit part player for any of those teams. No. He was a key player for those teams. And that speaks for itself, because these big clubs, you might get one move to one, you might get a couple, but to play for 3 huge clubs when they were all in their peak, all in their heyday, it's ridiculous.
How many English players can say they've done that, even in 2 leagues? None. Only Michael Owen went to 2 leagues. Kevin Keegan, he mentioned Keelan, 2 leagues as well, Germany, England, and
Gary Lineker maybe.
Gary Lineker.
There's not many, a handful.
Paul Ince.
Paul Ince, Jadon Sancho, Jude Bellingham.
Done it in the Prem though. He's done it just in Germany, and that's it.
Exactly. But seriously though, like, not many English players can say they've done that, and I think little things like that, where it's a player transcends the sport, should be taken into account. I know it can be seen as off football, but at the end of the day, Beckham made his name through football first, and all the other things came later, and it didn't come for absolutely no reason. It wasn't just because he was married to a Spice Girl.
Did help though.
It did help. It did help that he was marketable, but he was a top player. For me, if I actually think about it, he might be in the top 3. English players, bro.
I think he is. I think he is, and that's not like that's not in terms of like trophies or stats or whatever. It's in terms of the overall package of everything combined, and in terms of, again, like I said earlier, he's one of them guys who transcends football. How many footballers are recognisable by name in America? I know he played there, but he's one of these people who is bigger than not bigger than the sport, but he's one of those people who exists inside the sport and outside the sport. 100. So, I think he's got to be there simply for that reason.
No, I agree. Just we'll run through some more players. Just give a shout if you feel away about any of these players who didn't get any votes. Totti, Alan Shearer, Raul, Ballack, Eric Cantona, Ryan Giggs, Desai, Dalglish, Ruud Gullit got no votes. Miroslav Klose, the all-time World Cup goal scorer, got no votes. George Best got no votes. Zanetti, no votes. So that's a few. Roberto Baggio as well, no votes.
Oh, do you know what? There's one person I thought would have Baggio there.
Yeah.
That's my dad, and he didn't have Baggio there, yeah. So when he sent me his list and he didn't have Baggio on it, when I was growing up, he used to tell me Baggio was like so good, and he didn't put him on his list. I was like, bro,
I know.
It doesn't make any sense, but to be fair, I think he rushed the list. I think I asked him and he felt like he was under pressure to get it to me in time.
Yeah.
So, that's one person I'm surprised about. I think if we asked someone who was older than my dad, like who was in their 60s maybe, then I think Best probably would have been there.
Yeah.
Because if I asked my granddad probably have George Best, number 1.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Keelan, if you
my dad would 100% put Best in his top 3, but I always with Best, I wasn't sure of it as one where like it was just a lot of his attention was being on like the sort of working man hero, and he's sort of done all the stuff that people want to do without sort of sacrificing his ability to play football. But like you look at how his career ended, and you've got serious questions. It's played for about 20 clubs in 10 years.
I think he's got the streets on his side. Yeah. Same as Gascoigne, same as quite a few of other people, probably some in this list as well. He's got that sort of, again, that bigger than football sort of. You can relate to him, and he's so good at what he does, and you can relate to him. It feels like you're him, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm shocked he isn't there. To be honest, I thought
he would have got.
I thought he would have got
vote.
one vote. I thought Dutch would have put him in, or someone like that, or one of your brothers. I thought, someone.
Yeah, no votes. I mean, George Best. Yeah, you're right, Keelan. Playing for 20 clubs, whatever, and everything else that happened outside of his career.
Dunstable Town. Played for Dunstable Town.
Not too far from here, about 5 minutes away from here. He played for, believe it or not. That has to be taken into account because, you can't just rate a player just based off their potential or what they could have been, because then you'd have Ben Arthur in this list, Yeah. So
it's also like a bit of respect for the game as well,
exactly.
And how his career ended up. He wasn't being respectful to football, and ultimately it was reflected in how his career ended.
100%, man. And just a couple other players. These players got votes, right? So Terry got a vote, as I said earlier. But if I actually think about it, right, he's the best English centre back of all time, easily. Actually, Bobby Moore. Between them two.
Rio,
but John Terry when he was playing, bro, John Terry was long, man.
Nah, John Terry was
long, man.
Was really good. He was really good, but
yeah, all-time players.
It's tough because for me, right, and some viewers are going to dislike this. He was a great defender and he was underrated with his feet, but I think in terms of an overall footballer, I think Rio Ferdinand was a better overall footballer.
No, that's not an unpopular opinion.
Than him. Terry maybe was a fantastic centre back, but even in Chelsea's finest hour in the modern era, he wasn't there in the final.
Yeah, and
Rio Ferdinand captained this team.
Obviously, the other final where he was there, we all know what happened. The penalty slip.
So I think that's a bit crazy. Someone being in the top 10, man. That's crazy.
Schmeichel got a couple votes.
Really?
Yeah, Schmeichel got a couple votes.
Schmeichel.
I feel like it's one of them ones you had to be there, because I reckon if I was born in 1990, say, I might have. If I was vote keeper, I might vote him.
Okay. Is there another keeper on the list?
One of Neuer.
Okay. Okay, I was going to say, because if Neuer wasn't there and Peter Schmeichel was, I was going to leave the room, bro.
Couple other players. Iniesta, not in the top 10. Keelan, how do you feel about that? He was in your top 10.
Yeah, in total. I think that's harsh. I think that's harsh.
I'm pretty
obviously,
sure.
I think naturally forwards do obviously dominate these things, and that's rightfully so. They are the ones that make a difference in games. But I think Iniesta. To be fair, I've probably grown more towards him since he sort of retired. But I think
he's still playing, I think.
He is.
He's still playing. Since he's gone to Japan. His impact on the pitch. That Spain team as well, the double Euros and World Cup, I've got a tremendous amount of respect for that team, and I do think he was sort of the beating heart if there was one of that team, and I think that was why I wanted to put him in the list. But I get, I'm not too surprised he's not in the top 10.
Do you know what? I hear what you're saying, definitely. For me, I'm shocked because many people consider that Spain team the best national team ever in our lifetime. Many people consider that Barcelona team the best club team ever. He's involved in both of them, a pivotal part. Scored Spain's most important goal in their history. Was involved in so many moments for Spain and Barcelona.
Probably the best Spanish player of all time.
Probably the best Spanish player of all time.
He's not on the list.
Two European Championships, 1 World Cup, 3 Champions Leagues, multiple league titles, multiple FIFA Pro Team of the Years. I think probably 8, 9 FIFA Pro Team of the Years.
There can't be many people with more.
There can't be many people with more than that.
Not in the list.
And I had him 9th, right? And I regret having him 9th. He'd probably be, for me, he's probably 6th or 7th now if I was redoing the list. But that's crazy.
It's crazy to be. He's a flawless footballer, and some other players that are in this list, right, haven't actually had throughout their whole career top spells of form. We'll get onto certain players later. Iniesta from about 2003 to about 2017 for Barcelona was a mainstay in that midfield, and obviously he has other stars in that team. He's had Messi, Ronaldinho, which probably overshadows him, unfortunately. Oh yeah, Xavi as well got no votes.
Xavi got none.
Yeah. I'm fine with that, to be fair.
He wasn't in my top 10.
Baller, but
I just realised someone I missed as well.
Yeah.
Did Busquets get any votes?
No, Busquets got no votes.
Oh, the best DM ever.
And just outside the top 10, Platini, a player I've unfortunately never watched. I haven't seen many clips of, but I've heard he's actually arguably the French GOAT, him and another player.
2 Ballon d'Ors.
2 Ballon d'Ors.
Is it 2?
What, Ballon d'Ors?
Is he not 3?
I think it's 2. I think it's 2, yeah.
Yeah, UEFA president, not in there.
That's probably why he isn't there.
A player I want to touch on, to be fair, who got a couple of votes, and I think is very underrated, Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp got a couple of votes, not in the top 10. I wouldn't have him in my top 10. But Dennis Bergkamp, when he was at Ajax, he was actually like a goal scorer, right? Check his record for Ajax, like 100 goals in like 100 games. Came Arsenal, was the first star outside the Prem really to come to the Prem. And in his early years at Arsenal, was probably the best player in the Premier League. Had his moments as well, the amazing goal against Argentina. And when I'm looking at players for this list, I was looking at players who's like, it's like, wow, what they're doing. I don't think many other players can work their whole lives and do that. I think Dennis Bergkamp had a few of those moments. He's not in my list, but from people who are like a bit older than me, they rate him very highly. Eric Cantona, another player of that kind.
Yeah, I mean, them two get compared a lot, right? But what mine goes to, what you said about Bergkamp, that's, for me, if Bergkamp's in your top 10, someone like Eden Hazard has to be in your top 10 as well.
Yeah.
Because he's done just as much in England, was the best player in the country for a few years, won the league in France, has won the league in Spain now as well. I know he's not been like a key part of Real Madrid, but if someone like Bergkamp's there, Bergkamp, great player, one of my favourite players to watch clips of when I was younger as well. Such a good player, so elegant, my type of footballer. But when you look at everything as a whole, and I get an Arsenal fan putting him there, don't get me wrong, because he's a god for Arsenal fans, but I think in the grand scheme of things, if someone like Bergkamp's there, then someone like Hazard has to be there, Cantona.
Yeah, no, I agree. Keelan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think with Bergkamp as well, similar to why I didn't include Xavi and probably why they haven't been included, is because I think in that Arsenal team, obviously Henry massively overshadows Bergkamp, and when you are doing a top 10, you don't want to put too many guys in from the same team, because then you're just sort of making a top 10 which is just one team. And I think obviously incredible player, won pretty much most of what there is to win, great at Arsenal, but I just think Henry was always the guy. If you took out that Arsenal team, they would have been a lot worse, whereas Bergkamp not so much.
I think I hear that. I think Bergkamp, talent-wise, might be one of the best players ever played the game.
Crazy player.
But in terms of necessarily output, probably, there's a few players in this list that have to probably go ahead of him. One last player I want to touch on who got one vote. He was voted quite highly, so it's put him quite high up, and never really gets spoken about by people of our age, is Romario. Romario's got, I think, in history, the 4th most goals ever. And
was that Dutch you put him in?
No, my brother put him in.
Your brother put him in?
Yeah, Mali put him in. Yeah, and
it's a shout.
Barcelona, Real Madrid, I think he played for both teams and was unreal for both. I'm sure if you go to Brazil, he's a god out there, But not in the top 10. And we will get into the top 10 finally. It's taken a while. In 10th place, the only defender in this list, Paolo Maldini.
El Capitano.
Paolo Maldini. Let me go through some of his stats. 7 Serie A titles. In 2 seasons, right? 87-88, 14 goals conceded. 94-95, 15 goals conceded.
That's a joke.
Insane.
That is a joke.
For a defender, 3rd place in the Ballon d'Or. Most appearances for AC Milan. Is Paolo Maldini the best defender of all time? Or does he just get rated highly because of his longevity? He played with great defenders, let's not forget.
He did.
Costa Curta, Nesta, Jaap Stam. And I've heard arguments that players like Nesta were arguably better. I'll give my take on it. I think, low-key, I think he does get rated highly on his longevity. I didn't have him in my list, to be honest. Obviously, when he was balling, kind of the end of his career, fair enough, he plays centre-back and left-back, but I'm not really too keen on putting utility. Not that he's a utility guy, But a guy that can fill in bare roles, I'm not really trying to have him in my list, man, if I'm honest. And in Italy's most successful hour, he wasn't there. I know he was probably about 36. Nesta was there. He wasn't there. I'm not saying he wasn't a baller, but I generally don't think he's in the top 10 players to ever play this game, man, despite playing 20 years. Because then, why isn't Ryan Giggs on the list?
Is he a top 3 centre-back of all time?
Yeah.
Is he a top 3 left-back of all time?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? I think he's a top 3 of all time, both those positions. If you're world class in 2 positions, across 2 decades,
3 in fact.
3 in fact, but world class in 2.
Yeah,
right,
for sure.
And you say obviously he had Baresi, he had Nesta, he had Costa Curta. You know, he had these great teams, but there's no, you know, he was in these teams and he was a key player, played every game in these teams. You don't do that if you're not world class, you know. I speak to my dad, I speak to family in Italy, and every person says to me about Paolo Maldini, this guy was a myth to play against. You know, he was quick, he was strong, he was good on the ball. Obviously, that's displayed by the fact he played left back and played centre back. He could probably be top 5 in the world in this modern era centre backs. I just think he's timeless.
Yeah, he's definitely timeless, but I mean, I don't know. I just feel like
the longevity is a huge factor.
Longevity is a huge factor, and bro, for me, putting a defender in, right, it's going to be very hard because when you're playing football, right, your best players are your forwards, man. Just go back to even just grassroots level, the best on the ball, the best, most gifted, and that's how we rate a lot of the players, and that's why most of our lists don't have defenders in it. It's usually forwards, so it's going to take a lot. And don't get me wrong, Maldini's done a lot. He's done a lot. But, you know, why would I put him in over, like... I mean, Keelan, would you have him over Sergio Ramos?
Nah, I wouldn't. Yeah, with him, obviously, quite a bit before. I can't say I've ever really watched him. But I just think with defences in general, they are a unit. Like, in that AC Milan team, if you stuck me at right back, they would have conceded a lot of goals that year. Whereas sort of as like a forward, like, so if I'm playing next to Messi, like Messi's output's going to be the same. I might reduce a bit, but he's still going to do his bit like of brilliance on the ball. Whereas with the defence is a bit more different. And like obviously his career, he's had amazing career. I do hear him as like a top 3 defender as all time, and obviously rightfully in the top 10 because defenders are football players as well. But yeah, I'd say Ramos, Piqué, Maldini. That'd be sort of around my sort of top 3. But I think it's fair to have him in the top 10.
For me, there's one defender who could chat to him. That's Dani Alves.
What about
because of all the things he's won?
Not you saying Carlos Beckenbauer?
Beckenbauer, yes, and that's one player I regret not having on my list.
Yeah,
because he transformed. You know, since we've done this list, actually, I've done a lot of research into a lot of old guys, just because I thought, when I was making the list, I thought to myself, you know what, I've actually, for someone who considers myself like a proper football boffin, like, I love football, obviously, I've got a flipping podcast about football. For someone who does this and, you know, is trying to make a living from this, I haven't watched a lot of these guys, so I've done a lot of research on Beckenbauer recently, and that guy was the first defender who could play football.
Yeah.
So I regret not having him on my list, but at the time we made the list, I didn't see enough of him. Yeah. But I think Beckenbauer and Dani Alves are the only people who can chat to him. Roberto Carlos didn't do it for a long enough period. Marcelo didn't do it for a long enough period. Ramos was amazing in one competition. In the Champions League. In La Liga, there's been several seasons where Ramos was fraudulent.
Facts.
Madrid fans will back that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not on this list. You know, it's funny I asked you the question about Ramos, you know, kind of insinuating I actually prefer Ramos to Maldini. I actually don't, to be fair.
But you're good at playing devil's advocate, man. That's your job. You're the host, bro. You're the host.
Nah, because, you're right. La Liga, bro, there was better. Bro, PK was better than Ramos for me.
Ramos was getting sent off every couple of weeks.
He was the best clutch goal scorer defender of all time.
But he's a defender,
I don't even know if he's the best Real Madrid centre back of all time. That might be Fernando Hierro, you know. So
it's probably Ramos.
I don't know, man.
Rafa Varane, bro. Champions League Varane.
Exactly. I just forgot. Another player got no votes, by the way. It's Luka Modric.
Fair.
What do you think about that, Keelan?
Yeah, I think no votes is harsh, but like it is. I feel like a lot of these players drop into like they would be like top 20, in which someone like Modric could be like 11th. But I think like he's very like similar to Iniesta in sort of playing style. They obviously get compared a lot, but I think like he's done really well with Croatia, considering what Croatia are as a nation. They've done so much at the past sort of World Cups, but just unfortunately, like, it is the sort of Croatian national team. He is going to struggle to win those trophies with them. And sort of in football, like, you do need to be with the best players, in which he's done that with Real Madrid. He's been amazing, but with those Croatia performances, like, getting to the final is nice, but like if you're not winning it, like, history won't remember that. And I'm sure
I have a question for you about Modric, right? Because you remember a conversation about 4 years ago we had about Modric. And I basically was saying, like, he's top 3 midfielders of all time. This was granted before they won, I think, the third and I think it was when before they won the third and the fourth. Might have even before they won the second Champions League. And I said this: have you changed your mind on that fact? Do you think he's a top 3? I'll go top 5 midfielder of all time, central midfield player of all time.
Yeah, I do, yeah. And I think it's with him, it's a weird one, because was it 27 he was when he went to Real Madrid? So like, his career started quite late. And I don't know, when I see him like sort of praised like for his performances, and so when you see his age and it's like 37-year-old Modric, whatever, it's like, I feel like it's obviously, he's that age, but it's like, it's almost saying like, is it not good if he's not that age? It's kind of discounting a bit so that it credits it more, because he's older. It means sort of his bar is a bit lower, and that's sort of how I interpret it when people bring age and stuff into things. But obviously, like, he did start late, but he's probably at the best he's ever been at that older age.
I think a player like Modric, and this, people don't realise this about footballers, I think a player like Modric and the role that he does and the way that he plays, even when he was 27, it wasn't like he was this all-action midfielder. You know, the way he plays, he was always, as he got older, he was always going to be still elegant and still able to play. That's why, you know, you've seen Giggs when he was a winger, he came into midfield and thrived in that role. You're seeing Messi come a lot deeper now as well, because when you play that position, you don't need to be making sprints every 20 seconds. You can sort of strut around the pitch, and you know, and you can use your experience to get in these positions. So the fact he's 36, 37, great, like, and he's amazing for his age. He's probably above average for his age, but in terms of the position that he plays and the role he does, you know, it's not that the whole age thing's a bit overrated in terms of that.
Yeah, literally, Keelan, I think you make a great point there when you say, you know, 37-year-old Modric, wow, look at what he's doing. It's like people are taking away.
People are taking the piss, bro. Taking the piss.
But it's also like they're rating him just because of the age thing.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about Modric, man. He's not in my top 3 centre mids of all time.
Really?
Nah, he's not. Okay. Because I genuinely, this is going to sound crazy, I don't think he's 10 times the player he is now than he was when he was at Spurs. When he was at Spurs,
he was amazing.
He was amazing at Spurs. He was a top player.
So good.
And I think obviously he's a better player now. But when I watched Croatia, right, I didn't watch him in the World Cup and think in any of the games he's running the show. He's their best player. I thought Kovacic was better than him in the World Cup. A lot of Real Madrid games I watch, right, he gets ran around, right? Not gonna lie, he gets ran around. Chelsea, I watched him in the quarterfinal, and for about 80 minutes. Of quality, though. But that's what happens. He had the moment of quality, and after the game, everyone was like, "Wow, how good is Modric?" But if you actually watch the
crazy assist, though.
It was a crazy assist, but like, you know, Ozil's had crazy assists. Modric is in probably my top 5 centre mids of all time, but I don't know if I can't say he's better than Iniesta. I can't say he's better than Zidane. I can't say he's better than Xavi. I don't know if he's better than a Paul Scholes, maybe. I genuinely don't. I can't.
It's a good comparison, them two. And I think.
But yeah, it is. But if you talk about careers, he's the best probably midfielder of all time. Second
in terms of accolades, careers,
in terms of accolades, yeah. And
but then Varane's probably one of the best centre backs of all time in terms of achievements.
Exactly. But from what I see, no, and I think people actually pay a bit of a disrespect to Croatia as well. It's amazing that Croatia have got so far because they're a small country. They shouldn't be as good as they are at football, right? But they're not as much of minnows as we think, right? In the late 90s...
They got heritage.
Exactly. In the late 90s, they got to the World Cup semis.
Davor
Suker, and probably those other players.
Yeah, but he's the most...
Slaven Bilic was there as well. I don't know how good he was. But... and then, you know, in the 2000s, like, and Modric was part of this team, by the way. Beat England's qualification, went Euros.
Nico Crenshaw. Terrific
and decent players.
player, as Harry Redknapp would say.
They've had decent players, basically. They're not mad minnows. But and then even in them games in the World Cup, bro, these managers going extra time, yeah. They're not even bopping the teams,
Stamina
bro.
merchants, man.
They're just going extra time, yeah. And they'll win on pens. Imagine they didn't win on pens in either of them 2 games, right? You don't hear about Modric in the tournament. Just like last Euros. How many people said Modric had a great tournament? I think he played just as well last year as he did in the World Cup. But they win a few games on pens, and it's like, let's ignore what Kovacic done.
That's football fans, though.
Let's ignore what anyone else in the team done, and just say Modric got them here. So that's why I wouldn't have him in my top 10, and I don't think he's the best midfielder of all time. He's probably about top 5 or 6, maybe. But
I think anything below top 5 is hard.
Even guys like Clarence Seedorf, bro, like
yeah, man.
I don't know if Modric,
crazy baller,
I don't know if Modric clears him, but
yeah.
Anyway, 9th place, I do know this. The best player to ever touch these shores. The best player to ever do it for the team I support, Arsenal Football Club. Thierry Henry, the Arsenal GOAT. 9th place, top 10. Louie, you're shaking your head. Talk to me.
Bro, I love Thierry Henry. Even, it was times he ruined my childhood, but fantastic player. Top 10's crazy, bro. When you get to some of the names on this list, right? Yeah. When we get to some of the names on this list, and obviously even a couple of people who've been left out, Henry, right, didn't win the Champions League until later on in his career. When he went to win the Champions League, he wasn't the main guy.
Facts, he wasn't.
Bottled it in the final with Arsenal. Was great in the league. Obviously, I will agree, probably the best player to ever step foot in England in the Premier League, other than maybe CR7. But top 10, with guys like Beckham missed out. It's crazy. But
interesting.
Listen, he's fantastic. World Cup winner, Champions League winner, Premier League winner, La Liga winner. Serie A winner.
Yeah.
Did he win Liga with Monaco as well?
He did.
So yeah, he's won the league in 4 countries.
Yeah.
And he's won the World Cup. So look, and he's a gentleman as well. He presents himself so well on TV, and such a good guy, great footballer. For Arsenal fans, I understand you guys putting him in your top 10 100% because that's your GOAT. And if I was an Arsenal fan, he'd be in my top 10 as well. But from someone who's a neutral in that perspective, nah, man.
Keelan, I want to hear your thoughts before I give my thoughts on Henry, because I've got a very staunch defence of Henry coming.
So I think, like I said, Henry, I think most people would agree he's the best player to grace the Prem, and a lot of people would go and say the Prem's the best league in the world, so make of that what you will. But obviously, I'm an Arsenal fan as well. But I think when you talk about players playing football in easy mode, I think that was actually Henry in the Premier League. Only player to get top assist, top goal scorer in the same season, multiple golden boots. And that was a very strong Arsenal team, obviously invincible season. Unfortunate in the Champions League in 2005 was it, or 2006, one of them. But I remember that, seeing highlights of that game when we went to the Bernabeu, and in those 2 legs, he was amazing across sort of both those legs. And I do think Arsenal were unlucky to win the Champions League that year. From what I do think they were the best team, arguably in the world at the time. But obviously, if you don't win in the final, you don't win in the final. But I think I had him 7th. I think best player to grace the Prem. 7th, yeah. So in terms of the career he had, obviously it's Champions League. It's a bit unfortunate that it came a bit later at Barcelona, but I don't think he was a passenger in that Barcelona team at all. He was a key player. Obviously Messi and Eto'o were better, or they had better, but he wasn't a bench guy. He was playing regularly. He wasn't doing crazy numbers, but he was still doing all right. And I think that was a smart move from him. Obviously at Arsenal it wasn't working in Europe, and I think he still had a decent contribution to that Barca team.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. Smart move for him to go there. I don't think it was a move where it's okay, I'm just going to go Barca and get the Champions League. You're right. He did add to that team, He was a key part for one season for Pep Guardiola. The next season, he kind of got replaced. But let me just read you some of the stats about Henry, because I think it's remarkable, right? So as you said, Keelan, the only player to get a 20 goal and 20 assist season in the Premier League, the league we call the best league in the world. And it's not a recent thing. We've called the Premier League the best league in the world for about 20 years.
I always objected to that until a few years ago.
Okay.
In my defense.
In the 2000s, right? He got the most goals and assists in the calendar year 4 times in the top 5 leagues in Europe, right? No player had more years in the 2000s where they got the top GA. I think next best was CR7, where he got two of those years, and it shows how great he was. Held the French all-time top scorer record for 15 years. Admittedly, his France record isn't actually, goal to minutes is not actually as great as his Arsenal record, but still, France all-time top scorer, won everything in the game. Only one of 4 players to win the European Golden Shoe. You know what that is, right? Most goals in Europe. 2 successive seasons, right? Basically, for me, Henry was he was the player of the 2000s, man. Like, I don't think if you go across that decade, in totality, there was a better player in terms of
Ronaldinho.
I think Henry did it for more years. I think Henry did it
at both their peaks.
You could say Ronaldinho had a better peak, but
Zidane.
No, Zidane wasn't better than Henry in the 2000s. I don't see how he was like.
No, I agree. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
And we will get on Zidane later because honestly, this stuff here, which I've said, it might not sound that great.
No, it's remarkable. It's remarkable.
We're going to talk about other players on this list, and you're going to be like, wow, And you're right. A player that plays football on easy mode, you watch him and you're just like, wow. A player like Lewandowski, right, might have a better goal scoring record now than Henry, but if you watch them both, I know who I'm taking.
He's not 10% of the player Henry was.
He's not. How many strikers can we say was better than Henry?
There's one we'll get onto who's definite.
Okay.
But other than that, I mean, striker as well. Like, he was a forward. He could, when he was at Juventus and Monaco, he played on the left as well. When he first came to Arsenal, he played from the left as well. So again, another player who was world class in 2 positions.
Yeah.
Listen, he's fantastic, great player, amazing. But the France record, it's a fair side point, but now it's been broken by Giroud.
Yeah, it's been broken by Giroud.
It's been broken by Giroud, probably going to get broken again by Mbappe.
Yeah.
I think player of 2000s, I'd say, for me, it's Ronaldinho. For me, it's Ronaldinho. Second, I can take Henry.
Why is it Ronaldinho and not Henry?
If Henry was the best player across the whole 2000s, why has he not got a Ballon d'Or to his name?
I don't know. That's
a huge injustice.
It's a huge injustice. And look, it's a fair point.
I mean, it is. Nedved shouldn't have won it.
It's a fair point, but okay, just accolades aside, right? Henry was getting more GA than Ronaldinho. I'm not saying he's better because they were in 2 different positions, obviously. But getting more GA and scoring in just as many big games as Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho wasn't going World Cup and scoring in the quarterfinals like Henry was.
Yeah, he was. Against England.
Yeah, he was too. There's Henry goal. But literally, in the France-Brazil game, 06, bro, Henry got the winning goal. Like, he wasn't... He had mad performance, bro. He went San Siro 1 year and tore it up.
Oh, no, he was great.
In the finals, he wasn't bagging, like, bare goals, like Henry wasn't scoring bare in finals, but I don't know what if you won the Champions League, the perception would be so much different. And I guess you have a player who you feel so strongly about who didn't win this one trophy for years, and it's like he's won this one trophy now. It's like finally, and you said, but didn't you know that the whole time? I feel like that's kind of how it is with Henry. If he wins that Champions League, I think we're talking about him easily in this top 10.
That's a great point because it's the same as me with Messi.
Yeah.
People are saying, "Oh, Messi didn't win the World Cup. Messi didn't win the World Cup." If he doesn't win the World Cup, or if he did win the World Cup, doesn't change shit for me.
Yeah, but I feel like it would have changed a lot if Henry won the champs with Arsenal,
and if he won a Ballon d'Or as well.
But bro, let's not forget, man won. He was the best player in the Invincible season. Let's not.
Great.
Let's not have a slight on how hard that is to go Invincible as well.
Yeah, of course.
No other player in this list. Maybe Maldini's done that.
Maldini probably has, yeah.
Yeah, 9th place, Henry. Any more words on Henry?
No.
Change your mind, Louie?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. The more I think about it, the more I understand him being there, and especially if from an Arsenal fan's perspective as well.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge people for that, but I do think there's 10 better footballers than him. There's a couple of people I missed out on my list as well who maybe could have had an argument for that as well.
No, there is for sure. 8th place, he's just looking a bit tight. How are we doing this? Okay, cool. The inventor of one of the most effective skill moves, you could say. Simple but so effective. The inventor of, one of the key proponents of total football, Johan Cruyff. Keelan, did you have him in your list?
Nah, I didn't have him in my
doing,
list.
man?
It was
Not on your list?
On my honourable mentions, but I can't comment on the guy too much. Obviously, I can see what he's won and obviously how he has revolutionised football, in which I think, in terms of what I see, a bit of that gets merged into a sort of managerial career as well. So they kind of, just in terms of his legacy, I kind of see him as one. I completely get him being in the list.
Yeah, let me just read you through some of his accolades. 3 Ballon d'Ors, 8 Eredivisie titles for Ajax across 3 decades, 3 European Cups for Ajax in a row, 1971-73, 294 goals in 518 games. Ajax all-time top scorer with 257 goals. This is an interesting one, but he scored 33 goals for Holland and they never lost a game in which he scored. But he won 0 international trophies. Would you say that probably holds him back from being higher in this list?
No, because he boycotted the 1986 World Cup, and Holland were probably the strongest team, or one of the strongest teams. He boycotted that because of the situation. I think it was 86, because of the situation in Argentina with the dictatorship. So he refused to go. Yeah. So honourable as well.
Yeah.
I think. Look, there's no Cruyff, there's no Pep. If there's no Pep, there's no Arteta, there's no Ten Hag, there's no... It's true, though.
Yeah.
It's true. And, he's...
Well, you can't bring that into...
You can, because because as I said at the beginning, right, I'm not just going off... Him as a footballer, 3 Ballon d'Ors, did you say?
Yeah.
3 Champions Leagues back-to-back?
Yeah.
So as a footballer, he deserves to be there, but also, the sport we know today, football we know today, wouldn't be football it is today without Cruyff. So he's there for football reasons, but he's also there for the fact that he transcends football. Yeah. Right? When I went to Amsterdam as well, he's one of them guys who, like another player who I have second in my list, there's certain people who are gods in certain places. In Amsterdam, he is a god. He's got the stadium named after him, which there are other people who have stadiums named after them, but that's God status. Yeah. Built their academy system pretty much. Built Barcelona's academy system. A lot of people say he's the godfather of Dutch football, and the godfather of Spanish football. And he's not even Spanish as well. Yeah. So he's got to be there. I think even him being 8th is harsh.
Yeah, possibly. When you read them stats, it's like, wow, he was...
I didn't realise he was that good stats-wise as a player.
Yeah, I know, crazy, because, I didn't have him in my head as a, number 9 like that, but he's got number 9 type stats, and obviously the 3-peat, incredible. He was
the first false 9 ever as well.
Yeah, but he wasn't in my list only because I just haven't seen enough of him to put him in, and I do feel like... the managerial stuff kind of gets in the way in terms of his football career. And with the total football thing, I did a little bit of research on it. And the manager of that Dutch team was called Rinus Michels, who's actually considered one of the GOATs of management. Yeah. And obviously, he made total football in the 70s and with the Ajax team. And they had, obviously, Cruyff was their best player. I kind of feel like that's why, we associate total football with Cruyff, because Cruyff was the best player in a total football team. And it's kind of reasonable. He was
the student who became the master of it, basically.
And that's fair. But look, if I was 50 years old, probably in my list. But I also think as well, if I was 50 years old, I might have Socrates in my list, and I might have Zico in my list. I might have Beckenbauer, George Best,
Bobby Charlton.
Bobby Charlton, he got a vote, by the way. Ryan voted him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ryan
voted him. That's such a Ryan thing to do. Yeah. That's so funny.
Yeah, but for those reasons, it's just, if I put him in the list, I feel it's harsh leaving those others out, so I didn't put him in the list at all. Move on. Number 7, right? Rest in peace, the late great Pele.
7.
Pele, according to the Streets Won't Forget podcast, is the 7th greatest player of all time. I'll confess,
my days.
only because I haven't seen much of him, he wasn't in my list. He wasn't in my list at all. and I half regret it. A part of me also does think I've heard that there were other top players in that Brazil team like Jairzinho and Garrincha, Carlos Alberto, yeah, and it's like,
yeah,
you know, I feel harsh putting him in this and then leaving those others out. But look, I'll read you some of his stats, and when I read these stats, I'm like, yeah.
Are they the updated stats, or are they?
These are the latest up-to-date stats. 1,283 first-class goals. Whatever first-class means.
What are they on fucking planes? He's scoring against the air hostess.
Oh my days. First class, I don't know what that means, to be fair. Only player to win 3 World Cups. Incredible. Youngest winner of a World Cup in 1958, 17. He scored 2 goals in the final against Sweden. Scored 8 in one game for Santos. But this is what I found remarkable. 92 hat-tricks across his career. He scored 4 goals on 31 occasions. He scored 5 goals on 6 occasions and 8 goals once. Described by Bobby Moore as the most complete player he's ever seen. And he's arguably the reason why Brazil are Brazil in football terms that they are today.
Yeah, he is.
So I have to ask, why is he not number 1? And don't look at me, or I don't think you had. Did you have him? I think you did actually.
Would you have him?
I had him 4th.
Okay, I had him 3rd.
No one had him in their top 2 in their list. Mm-hmm. Why is he not in top 2s? Or just, speak on Kelly, actually.
Yeah. Rest in peace,
Yeah.
first and foremost. I think sometimes people die and, there's things said about him, but he's passed away, and every single person I've seen has had good things to say about him as a person and as a player. I think he's one of the footballing immortals in terms of he's got the status that's untouchable. Mm-hmm. I think there's one thing that he was missing, and that was playing in Europe. But what people have to understand is back in those days, air travel wasn't as industrialized as it was now. It wasn't as simple as just getting on a plane and coming and signing for a European team. Most Brazilians and South Americans in those days, in the 60s and 70s, played it in Brazil or in South America. Because it simply wasn't practical for them to go and play in Europe. So those leagues were a lot better than what they are now, because you had players from the Brazil team, you had players from the Argentina team, from the Uruguay team, from Paraguay, who were decent back then. Yeah. You had these guys all playing together in the South American league. So yes, he didn't play in Europe, and that's probably why some people have him lower than they do, because the Champions League, we've got a very European centric way of viewing things in Europe, and I get that. But again, he's one of them people who's bigger than football, and he's 3 World Cups, ridiculous. Youngest player to score in a World Cup final, youngest player to win a World Cup.
Yeah, 17.
17 years old, bro.
What were you doing at 17?
At 17, I was wanking into a sock. So, there we go, bro. There we go.
Whilst other players were scoring the World Cup final.
My man was playing the World Cup final.
Yeah.
Scoring the World Cup final.
It's crazy. I mean, Keane, do you think he should, if you look at just the career, forget eye test, he'd be number 1 for you, surely? Or
nah,
2?
So with the career, obviously, the guy has won 3 World Cups. But I can't look beyond the fact that I think one of the World Cups he didn't make an appearance, and another, I'm pretty sure he made 3 appearances and he didn't score. So yeah, that goes back into what you were saying. That Brazil team clearly was an amazing team. Like, sort of, even in those 2, I'm pretty sure those 2, he didn't score many goals in 2 of the World Cups. Like, that Brazil team still went on to win it. In which, obviously, yeah, the one in between, he scored a lot of goals. He was a key player in that team, but obviously those goals sort of came out and they still went on to sort of win it, and that was sort of what would have happened if I like to look at that, if like Pele wasn't there, would things be too different? Yeah. And I think with some of those World Cups they wouldn't be too different. But yeah, I think stats wise, like sort of when I was young, I would have had a lot more of those numbers, obviously incredible, but also the way, like rest in peace to the guy. But with him coming out on like socials, updating like goals on his like Instagram bio and stuff, like it really does take a lot of credibility away from it. And from the moment like you get caught doing that once, like how I see it, like he could have like 100, like he could have like 200 goals, but he's just making them up because he's changed it once. Like he could have done it multiple times, but from obviously the official, the numbers that people do publish, those numbers are sort of mental. But how accurate those numbers are.
I mean, you got to kind of hear it from his perspective in terms of updating the goals. Imagine in 50 years' time, Cristiano Ronaldo, for some reason, we lose all this footage of him, and one account saying he's got this many goals, one account saying he's got that many goals, and all of a sudden you got people calling them fraud or whatever, because you've got some players, some people were calling that about Pele, and it's like a lot of people haven't watched him and end up actually disrespecting him. So it's like,
but I think it was the game that Ronaldo matched that record that he changed something on his Instagram, and that's what everyone was like. If you want to clear up incorrect information, you do it like when it becomes apparent. You don't do it when it actually affects you and creates a problem for yourself.
It's a different era as well, because back then they had sort of friendly competitions, but they weren't friendlies, but they weren't official competitions. So he played against like a lot of European teams in intercontinental cups that weren't recorded as official games, but to the clubs and the players they were. So those goals weren't like, it's kind of like we've lost track of them. So people say like he's got like 300 goals in friendlies and stuff like that, but
they were legit goals.
It's a weird one, because obviously it's difficult to go back and get the footage of all those things, because a lot of them weren't recorded and televised. You have to go off word of mouth. But the word of mouth people say about him from people who played with him, crazy.
No one who played in that era doesn't really have him as one of the top players. I don't hear anyone really say from that era like, he wasn't actually that good. People always like,
well, even Maradona said he's the best player of all time.
Yeah, exactly. Maradona's watched him, so and Maradona considers himself very highly in terms of rest in peace, Maradona. We'll get onto him. But that's it. Pele at number 7 sounds harsh.
That's crazy, bruv.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to. Anyway, number 6. A player who's already been mentioned so far, Joga Bonito, skills, probably the most skillful player ever to play the game. A player who absolutely transcended the sport. Growing up, if I was thinking of footballers, I was thinking of this guy first, definitely. So iconic, always played with a smile on his face. Was apparently having sex before games.
At the Stade de France. Had his own little room. They mentioned it on the tour in Paris.
And that might be a reason he's not higher on this list, because if he was so focused on his football, he would be top 3 easily. Ronaldinho, just want to go through some of his stats. Back-to-back FIFA World Players of the Year in 2004 and 2005. That award doesn't exist anymore. Got defunct in 2009. He got 3 league titles, 2 for Barcelona, 1 for AC Milan, 1 Champions League, 1 Copa America, 1 World Cup. In the FIFA Pro 11, 2005 till 2007, all those years. Away from football, he also had the first YouTube video to hit 1 million views.
Is that a crossbar one?
Yeah, first one.
I remember, to be fair, I probably about 10,000 of those views, to be fair.
Exactly.
With your sock.
I was way younger than 17. I was like 5.
Yeah, literally now. Yeah, it would have been about 5 years old, so you can guess how old we are from that. But yeah, for me, he's the most skillful player definitely to ever play the game. But should he have had a better career, would you say, Keelan? I mean, or do you think he did what he could?
I think like he enjoyed being on the football pitch. Like he won everything at least once, and that's like. Yeah, like he ticked all the boxes, but he could have had a better career. But I think that's when I think in the past 10 years, football has become like players are going to 35, 40 now. I think he done what was the normal at the time. He exceeded expectations slightly. His career was very good, and I had him 5th. And after 4th, which is where I had Pele, there was a very big gap in my mind of 4th and 5th, and I think those top 4, they're absolutely almost perfect careers that any player would trade to have that trophy collection. And I think Ronaldinho, he's the best of the people below. And I think that top four, they've set the bar ridiculously high. And I think in terms of, I think he could have had a better career, of course, because it was quite short as far as some careers go. But like he'd done all he needed to do. He enjoyed being on the pitch. And
What makes Ronaldinho better than players like Kaká, better than even a player like Kevin De Bruyne?
Bro, are you going to say that? I love De Bruyne, but that second Kaká I can see.
Yeah,
Kaká I can see.
Brazilian.
No, because Kaká was the best player in the world at one point.
Yeah,
De Bruyne's never been the best out and out best player in the world.
Facts.
Ronaldinho has been the best player in the world, but I think also as well for people our age, Ronaldinho is always going to be someone who's held in very high regard because when we were playing football at school, everyone wanted to be Ronaldinho. Everyone would get their little chewing gum, kick it, do some kick. Everyone wanted to do step overs, kick ups, wanted to hit the crossbar, and wanted to get the ball on the back of their neck and run with it and stuff like that. So look, Ronaldinho is one of those guys. He was the face of FIFA Street. He was the face of T90, the face of Nike, the face of the Brazil national team. He dunked on England. And he's the reason I fell in love with football. No one's ever said they fell in love with football because of Kaká or De Bruyne.
Nah, that's facts, and it's such a valid point. But I just think with Ronaldinho, if I'm being devil's advocate here, like 2004 till 2007, if we're stretching it, 2008 maybe, unbelievable. Definitely the best player in the world from about 04 or 05, definitely. Mm-hmm. In his AC Milan career, very far from the best player in the world, if I'm honest. I know he played for AC Milan, so it's like, he played for a big team, he won a league there. But I don't know, Serie A, apart from Inter Milan, it wasn't the best league in the world at the time. Milan were going Fratton Park and getting stressed. John Utaka was dunking on AC Milan back in 2008.
That's a crazy Portsmouth team, though.
They won the FA Cup and they had certain players. They were a good team, Portsmouth. I mean,
I've been to that ground as well and watched the game a couple of times. That's a scary place,
bro. Easy place to go to.
It's a scary place, man.
I just think longevity-wise, if you take away the skills and how great everything is, you actually start to have an argument over a lot of players. And even if you're going back, Roberto Baggio.
I think it all depends on how you view football.
Yeah.
Do you view football as a sport and you have to win and that's the be all and end all, or do you view it as an art form and something that's bigger than just a sport and something that's the way of life and a culture? Because if you view it the first way, I hear the argument, but if you view it the second way in terms of Joga Bonito and it's a performance rather than simply a sport, then Ronaldinho's the main conductor of that.
I just think if you view football, I'm not saying what way I do view football, but I definitely know if you view football the second way, then you're going to have a lot of players in this list that shouldn't be. Well, you're going to have players like Ricardo Quaresma rated way higher than he should be because he was Joga Bonito, he was so skillful.
Ronaldinho also has the CV to back up the first point as well. He
does, but, I was surprised that he only won 3 league titles in his career.
So when you read that, I was baffled.
I was surprised at that. And, look, Faye won the Ballon d'Or, but, look, first memories of football, World Cup 2006? I don't think he had a great tournament. I remember him going to play France and Zidane was easily the best player on the pitch that day. Yeah. And I don't know, I just feel like if you read all that stuff out, we were talking about Henry earlier and saying he should be nowhere near the list. I think that's absurd to say if we're so comfortable putting Ronaldinho in the list. Personally, that's how I feel.
I get that, but as I said, I'm not an Arsenal fan. There probably are Arsenal fans who say Henry made me fall in love with football. Yeah. I'm not a Barcelona fan, Milan fan. Not particularly a Brazil fan. But Ronaldinho made me love football. Yeah. And there's a man who is first on my list who has carried on that love. But Ronaldinho made me love football. Yeah. Henry, I never watched Henry and thought, wow, I want to be this guy. Crazy. You probably have, because you're an Arsenal fan.
Bro, Henry.
But for me, Ronaldinho was the first reason I watched football and fell in love with football.
I don't want to keep going back to Henry, but bro, this guy was in the adverts as well. Let's not remember, we've all seen that advert where man scores from behind the goal, bro. Come on, man. He had the boots, T90s.
But I don't remember that at the time as much.
Fair enough. Nah, that's fair. Ronaldinho, FIFA Street back in the day, it was a great time. definitely.
The purple T90s.
And that advert where he scored with his head on the floor, amazing. Ronaldinho, he deserved. Look, he was in my top 10. So
he could not make you in a post box as well.
Not make you on a post box.